This tutorial will teach you the basics of lighting and how to properly light any scene with just 3 lights. We'll go over various lighting techniques and what mistakes to avoid when you're lighting your scene. So first, let's go over some simple basics about lighting. Usually you want to have at least 3 lights lighting up your scene to get the best results, but you can have as many as you'd like. So you're mainly going to have 3 types of lights for your scene. The first is the key light, which is going to be shining directly onto your character to provide most of the light. The second light is going to be the fill light. It's going to fill in all of the shadows that your key light is casting because of any objects in the scene. And it will make sure there is plenty of light on both sides of your character. So usually you want to have them in front of your character. Then you have the backlight, which is going to be shining on the back of your character or on your background. Generally, I recommend only using your backlight on the background because otherwise, if you face it towards the subject or away from the background, you may create lots of shadows and dark spots in various places. But with certain scenes, such as interior scenes, you can face the light in between the background and your subject to give light to both areas. And then any other lights you add can be for whatever you want. You can have another light on the background, you can have 3 lights on your main subject, whatever fits your scene the best. Also, if at any point you don't know what type of light you should be using, it really doesn't matter. Most lights will get the job done, and I recommend using a desk lamp that's easily movable. Besides that, it can be whatever you want. The 2 things you want to make sure are lit well in your scene are, of course, your main characters and your background. Your key light and your fill light are naturally going to be facing towards the center where your main character probably is, so lighting your main character well is not going to be a problem. What you want to focus on is making sure your background looks okay. And basically, when you're trying to light your background, what you want to avoid is casting shadows onto your background because it can look very unnatural since the sky should not have shadows on it. So let's say you have some sort of backdrop like what I have here for a foresty scene. I want to make sure my light is behind the backdrop so that there are no shadows from my backlight. So I recommend all of your props and subjects in the scene are pushed away from your background just enough so that your background light will not be casting shadows onto the background. Now, let's say your character has a hat on and it's really difficult to light their face properly without getting some unnatural lighting coming from below the minifigure, or you have some areas of your background you're not able to light properly. Another thing you can do is use light colored bricks or paper to reflect light back onto your subject. So I will put some usually white bricks, but in this case I have white paper, underneath the subject out of the scene, of course, so you're not gonna be able to see this. So here I put a white plate underneath of this Lego man, and you can see his face is pretty dark with his hat, but once we put the plate in, it brightens up. And then you can also do that for your background. If there's an area of your background that's not being lit well, you can have some paper, some white paper or bricks here on the ground. So something that you want to avoid when you're trying to light your scene is overlighting or overexposing your shot. I don't think overlighting is a term, I just kind of made that up, but overexposing a shot is where the brightness setting on your camera, whether that be the shutter speed or just the automatic features on a phone, are just super bright and it's really hard on your eyes. Here's an example of a shot that is clearly overexposed, and to fix that you simply need to turn down the settings on your camera to make the shot dimmer. And overlighting your scene, as I would call it, is where you have really intense reflections on characters or certain objects where the scene is not necessarily overexposed, but there are really intense lights on some areas. This is a picture of a good exposure with well-balanced light, and this is one where you can see the lights on the character are very intense, but the wall is not necessarily overexposed. And how you can avoid that is either moving the lights farther away or dimming them if you have the setting, or diluting the light with some paper or other thin objects that the light can still get through. Okay, so now your scene is lit properly. Now you can get into different effects that you can make with your lights. Let's say you just have this outdoor scene with lots of trees, he's out in nature. How would you light this? What you should be thinking about when you're lighting your scene is where would the light be coming from? When you're outside, obviously it's going to be coming from where the sun would be, so it would be be coming from above, and I'll just make sure my lights are above the character facing down, and if necessary, if there are any shadows that are created from that, I'll just put lighter bricks or paper on the table so I can make sure there are no shadows on my characters. And then if you want to create the illusion of different times of day, you can move your lights to the position where the sun would be. So if I want to make a scene where it's sunset, I'm going to take these lights and I'm going to bring them down either in front or behind the character, depending on where the sun is. And then if you have a different scene where your light is coming from another source, such as an interior scene, you're gonna have lights from above as if there's lights on the ceiling of your room, and you want to make sure there is light coming through the windows from outside for a more natural look. So for these lights, I would position them like I normally would for any other scene. It doesn't really make a difference, but I want to make sure there's light coming in through the windows because that creates a really cool effect. So I would take this light, I would bring it down, either pointing inside the windows like this, as long as my background is still lit properly, or I would just have my lights facing in between the background and the set here so that my background is still well lit and some of the light is going to be coming through the windows. And now let's say you want to have a scene where it's dark outside. Of course, you would turn this light off. You don't want any light from outside if there's no light outside, unless you have like stars or something. But I would have the lights for inside here. And then if this was outside, I would turn my lights to a cooler temperature like so, as it gives a little bit more of a nighttime look. And then of course for nighttime, I would usually only use 1 or 2 lights depending on how bright you want it to be outside, or just use all 3 lights but keep them really dim. It just depends on how you want it to look. So there's a lot of experimenting here, and while we're on the topic of different colors of light, it's important to make sure your camera settings has the right white balance for whatever lights you're using so that you don't get too orange of a tint or too blue of a tint in your picture. But I recommend keeping the same white balance throughout the entire video, unless you have a situation where it's sunset or it's nighttime and you want like an orange or a bluer look. But other than that, I would usually change the temperature of my lights before the white balance of my camera to keep the whole video consistent. And those are my tips and techniques to lighting my scene, and I hope you found some of it helpful. And if you'd like to learn how to get rid of light flicker and solve other common stop motion problems, you should check out this video right here. Thanks for watching.